Welcome to France in the mid-16th century, a place where the national sport was about to become religiously motivated civil war. The Protestant Reformation had arrived, and while some people were genuinely concerned about the state of their eternal souls, most of the important nobles were more concerned about the state of their political power. It all kicked off when King Henry II, a man whose main talent was being king, was spectacularly killed by a splinter in a jousting tournament. An absolutely ridiculous way to go. This left a series of his young, sickly sons on the throne, all managed by their perpetually exhausted mother, Catherine de' Medici. Two families saw a power vacuum. The ultra-Catholic Guise family, who thought the monarchy wasn't Catholic enough, and the Protestant-leaning Bourbon family, who thought the throne would look lovely with a bourbon sitting on it. This wasn't theology. It was a high-stakes corporate takeover with God as the majority shareholder. Things went from tense to bloody with impressive speed. First came the affair of the placards, where some very brave or very foolish Protestants plastered anti-Catholic posters all over the country, including, allegedly, on the king's own bedroom door. The official response was, shall we say, less than tolerant. But the real starting pistol was fired in 1562. Francois, Duke of Guise, was passing through the town of Vassy when his entourage discovered a group of Huguenots worshipping in a barn. This was technically illegal. What happened next is disputed, but it ended with the Duke's men slaughtering about 50 unarmed men, women, and children. The Duke's official story was that it was a tragic accident, that his soldiers were just provoked by some thrown stones. A classic case of my heavily armed retinue slipped and accidentally committed a massacre. And with that, oopsie, 36 years of war began. The first decade of conflict was a masterclass in pointless repetition. Historians count at least 3 separate wars in this period, but they all followed the same script. Step 1. Someone does something to upset the other side. Step 2. Armies are raised and they fight a few inconclusive battles where a major leader on each side conveniently gets killed or captured. Step 3. Everyone runs out of money and enthusiasm. Step 4. They sign a flimsy peace treaty like the Edict of Amboise, which gives the Huguenots just enough freedom to annoy the Catholics, but not enough to feel secure. Step 5. Wait a couple of years for paranoia to build, and then someone lights the fuse again, returning to Step 1. It was less a series of wars and more one long, poorly managed family feud with occasional ceasefires for everyone to go home and harvest the grapes. Enter Catherine de' Medici, Queen Mother and the most beleaguered political strategist in Europe. Her entire career was basically trying to keep the kingdom from imploding while her sons kept dying. She decides the endless cycle of war is bad for business and concocts a plan so brilliant it could only end in total disaster. A marriage, the ultimate 16th century peace initiative. She proposed to marry her Catholic daughter, Marguerite de Valois, to the de facto leader of the Huguenots, the charming and very pragmatic Henry of Navarre. The plan was to literally unite the two warring factions in holy matrimony. To celebrate this glorious union, thousands of Huguenot nobles were invited to Paris for the wedding. Paris, it should be mentioned, was a city so militantly Catholic that it viewed the Pope as a dangerous liberal. Bringing an army of Protestants into the city for, in hindsight, not the wisest move. The wedding took place on August 18, 1572. The atmosphere was less joyous celebration and more hostage negotiation. The Protestant groom, Henry, had to stay outside Notre Dame Cathedral during the Catholic Mass. It was deeply, profoundly awkward. A few days later, things escalated. An assassin took a shot at the main Huguenot military commander, Admiral Gaspard de Coligny, blowing off his finger and shattering his arm. The attempt failed, which was the worst possible outcome. A wounded, living martyr is much more dangerous than a dead one. The Huguenots were now apoplectic, demanding the king find and punish the culprit. The Catholic faction, led by the Guises, began to panic, fearing they'd be blamed. They convinced the young king, Charles IX, that the Huguenots were about to launch a bloody coup in revenge. The only option, they whispered, was a preemptive strike, a surgical removal of the Huguenot leadership. The surgical strike began in the early hours of August 24th, St. Bartholomew's Day. The bell of the Church of Saint-Germain-l'Auxerrois tolled, the prearranged signal. The first to die was Admiral Coligny, murdered in his bed and thrown from a window. Then the king's guards moved through the Louvre, systematically executing the Huguenot leaders who were staying there as royal guests. But this wasn't just a political purge. It was a license for the Parisian mob to unleash decades of pent-up hatred. For 3 days, the city descended into a horrifying frenzy of slaughter. People were killed in their homes, on the streets, their bodies thrown into the Seine. It was a complete breakdown of civilization, fueled by religious zealotry and opportunistic greed. When news reached Rome, Pope Gregory XIII was so delighted he had a mural painted to celebrate the event. Because nothing says Vicar of Christ like celebrating mass murder. Far from ending the conflict, the massacre poured gasoline on the fire. The wars raged on, becoming even more international and complex. By the 1580s, the whole mess had evolved into the gloriously confusing War of the Three Henrys. It's exactly what it sounds like, a three-way death match for the French throne, and everyone is named Henry. First, you have the incumbent, King Henry III. He's the last of the Valois sons, a Catholic but seen as too soft and willing to compromise by the hardliners. Then there's Henry, Duke of Guise. He's the charismatic leader of the Ultra-Catholic League, secretly funded by Spain and wildly popular with the people of Paris. Way more popular than the actual king, which is always a dangerous situation. Finally, there's our old friend Henry of Navarre, leader of the Protestants and, thanks to a very convenient family tree, the legal heir to the throne should King Henry III die without a son. It was a political Mexican standoff. The standoff didn't last. Henry of Guise grew so powerful that he basically kicked King Henry III out of Paris. The king, not taking this well, decided to solve the problem with assassination. He lured the Duke of Guise to a meeting and had his personal bodyguards stab him to death. Problem solved. Except now, the Catholic League was incandescent with rage. They declared open war on the king. A few months later, a radical Dominican friar, believing he was on a mission from God, gained an audience with King Henry III and fatally stabbed him. So, with 2 Henrys down, the winner by default was the Protestant Henry of Navarre. He was now, legally, King Henry IV of France. There was just one tiny obstacle. Catholic France, and especially Paris, would rather burn to the ground than be ruled by a heretic. After 4 years of fighting, Henry, ever the pragmatist, made a business decision. He converted to Catholicism, supposedly saying, "Paris is worth a mass." It was a masterstroke of cynical genius. Now, a Catholic king, Henry IV, could finally unite the country. In 1598, he issued his masterwork, the Edict of Nantes. This document is often hailed as a triumph of religious tolerance, but it was really more of a deeply practical, slightly exhausted ceasefire agreement. It didn't create a secular state where everyone was equal, it was a list of concessions. It confirmed Catholicism as the state religion, but granted Protestants, the Huguenots, specific rights to worship in specific places. It also gave them the right to hold public office and, most importantly, to maintain their own fortified towns for self-defense. This essentially created a state within a state, a solution that just screamed temporary fix. But after nearly 4 decades of mutual slaughter, no one was looking for a perfect solution. They were just looking for one that would let them get through a family dinner without a theological debate turning into a sword fight. So, after 36 years and 8 distinct wars, what was the grand takeaway? That mixing dynastic ambition, feudal rivalries, and absolute religious certainty is a recipe for disaster. The French Wars of Religion were a brutal lesson in how easily faith can become a political tool, a convenient justification for grabbing power, settling old scores, and generally behaving atrociously. The conflict left France devastated, but also centralized, paving the way for the absolute monarchy to come. The permanent solution of the Edict of Nantes lasted for 87 years, which is pretty good for a French government plan. It was eventually revoked by Henry IV's grandson, Louis XIV, who preferred religious unity, by which he meant, everyone believes what I believe, or they can leave. And so, thousands of skilled Huguenots packed their bags and left, taking their talents elsewhere. It's a timeless story, humans enduring unimaginable horror to learn a valuable lesson, then promptly allowing their descendants to forget it completely. If you enjoyed this video, please like, comment, and subscribe to our channel for more historical insights. Thanks for watching, nerds!